All right, we're going to wrap up with a couple of our favorite segments. I'm going to start with arrow pointing up. Jordan, I'll let you start.
No, I want to set you up because I think you,
Okay.
you you got one that I think we'll talk about a big week for Georgia basketball.
Yeah, so I've got two actually. So I'm gonna start with we're gonna call her the what are we gonna call her? This Stegeman Screamer. I think it's someone that was a nickname I know people are trying to latch on to the Vandy Whistler and they're trying to find a new phrase. But for anybody who's like, this is a Georgia football recruiting podcast. What in the hell are you talking about? Georgia had a big win last night. Like I said, we're recording on Wednesday morning. Tuesday night, Georgia has a massive win in basketball, I would almost argue like a must-win game against the number 3 team in the country, which is just never a situation you want to find yourself in. But Georgia really had to win that one. They find a way to win it after going up 26 points, almost blow it, find a way to salvage it right there at the end. Honestly, just a great win, and we can get into the game a little bit more if you want to as well. But if you're watching on TV, which I know you're not, and my understanding is that you can't really hear it in the arena, so it takes away some of the effect. But if you're watching on TV, I promise you know who the Stegeman Screamer is. And I'll say, I'm going to give a shout out. I'm going to have to pull a name up real quick. So just bear with me for just a brief second.
While you do that, Ben, I'll pull up my clip of
Yes, please.
Hey, shout out to the Stegman crowd. They're like, look, do not storm this court once this game ends. They put a 90-second timer up. Let's get Florida off the court. Here was the scene. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this, I'm pulling up the clip that I got once the crowd rushed onto the court. I mean, just super cool. People are asking me, I don't know that I've ever seen the court rush at Stegman, so just super cool. And shout out Mike White. This was against his former team. That there's part of him that has watched the ascension that Florida has had since he left. That has to sting to see the success Todd Golden's had. So to do that, to beat the number 3 team, to really bolster your chances of making the NCAA tournament, super cool.
So if you've been listening to these games, I remember hearing it for the first time for the Mississippi State game. Every time the Mississippi State was on the free throw line, you heard just an absolute shrieking sound going on the TV audio. Like if you search shrieking or screaming or something like that as it relates to Stegeman Coliseum during these Georgia games, the Mississippi State game and the Florida game in particular, I promise you're going to hear a lot of commentary about it. Maybe some mixed opinions, let's put it that way. Maybe not even that mixed. I think a lot of people have been very, like, oh my God, this is unbearable. I want to give a shout out because I have the stat on it from last night. As this was happening, everyone was saying, man, Florida can't make their free throws. I went back and looked at the stats. She was there for the Mississippi State game. She was there for the Florida game. Mississippi State shoots about 70% from the free throw line. They shot 33% from the free throw line when the Stegeman Shrieker was there. And then Florida is shooting about 72% from the free throw line. At the time that I put this out, I think they were shooting 50% from the free throw line. I think they ended up shooting just about 62% from the free throw line last night. So well under their season average, and it was way worse earlier in the game. In fact, Florida's free throw shooting is a big reason why they were in the deficit they were in to begin with. So I want to give a shout out because results are results. You could be annoyed when you're listening on TV, but at a certain point, whether you can hear her in the arena or not, it is impossible for me to, at this point, ignore the results of the Stegeman Shrieker, Screamer, whatever we're calling her. But I want to give a shout out to Gracie Salisbury. I put this tweet out on about the stats behind it, basically saying like, hey, look, it's a little obnoxious, but the results are what the results are. She sees this. She replies, she wanted to call it out that it was Gracie Salisbury was last night, and her friend, also part of the Spike squad, was from the Florida game. So she wanted to give fair credit and say that it's not one person individually, it's a group effort. But it's hard to deny at this point the results that they're seeing, and they're going to need to be there for the Vanderbilt game at the end of the season as well, because that's going to be a must-win too.
We salute your service. What an act! You want Stegeman Coliseum. You want the fans to play a role. Gracie and her friends, I think they're really stepping up to the plate.
My second arrow pointing up is we'll just talk. I feel like this is going to be a theme on this show, but just talking NIL, talking rev share. You mentioned it right there. Kirby Smart and Josh Brooks did everything that they could. I wish I could have witnessed this. I wish I'd been there to see this, to prevent the fans from storming the court until everyone on Florida had gotten off the floor, because that's where the fine is coming from. And I know what Josh Brooks and I know what Kirby Smart are thinking. Like, do not storm the court, because it's going to cost us money that is going to be valuable revenue share, NIL related money for these players. I think Dennis Gates, the Missouri coach, a couple of weeks ago, goes on the microphone with like 2 seconds left and is like, don't storm the court. We need that. And then in the post-game press conference, he's like, yeah, we need that money for NIL. Like, it's as simple as that. It's a new world that we're living in. So I wanted to say, call those two guys out for effectively allowing the storm court or court storming. Didn't feel like it affected the environment too much, but also saved the dollar.
I'm pretty sure Kirby was like putting his fingers together at one point, like, hey, it's going to cost us money. I thought this was probably about a month ago. I think it was Vanderbilt's athletic director had told like the fans, like, hey, don't storm the court so we can have a really good team next year. And that argument didn't work. But I like that. Like, hey, do you want to see us beat more top 5 teams? Then stay in the stands. And, I said, unless I was like getting ready to graduate, maybe if I'm graduating, I'm like, look, I got nothing to lose. I'm not going to watch this team next year, or I don't have the grades. I'm not going to be back next semester. I just got to go for it.
Yeah, that's right. I will also call, on that arrow pointing up on the NIL front, while we've been on this show recording it, our friend Mark Weiser from the Athens Banner Herald actually reported on the revenue sharing dollars, something that we've talked about really extensively in the last day Wolk UGA recruiting episode, but he got some very, some detailed exacts on what that money is going to look like. He referenced the $20.5 million that Georgia's athletic department will get for revenue share. We talked about that dollar figure specifically in the last show, but it does seem like football is going to get 75% of that revenue share dollars, which is equivalent to about 13.5 million. I think the number I was going with last episode was 14 to 15 million. So a hair under that. They'll try and offset, 7 to 8 million with that above the cap. And I'll shout out Ross Dellinger as well, just because he from Yahoo Sports does about as good of a job as anyone when it comes to reporting on these things nationally. Said that, talking about that over the cap dollars, non-school NIL deals that pass through the clearinghouse, as he puts it, are what can push rosters above that salary cap, which is sort of what we talked about in terms of real NIL deals that, again, they've got to pass NCAA clearinghouse, but that's how you're going to offset that. All right, Jordan, what's your arrow pointing up?
Couple of things. First off, arrow pointing up G-Day. We were at the Athletic Association board meeting on Tuesday, and I asked Josh Brooks about G-Day, about the future of the spring game for Georgia, because we're seeing teams like Texas, Nebraska, I believe Ohio State as well, going away from spring games. Josh Brooks said they're going to have G-Day this year. He said, you kind of can't commit year to year because of just how much things are changing, but he talked about that, he appreciates Kirby Smart, someone who sees value in the spring game. And I got the sense, they're not going to commit to it, but I would be surprised in 2026 and on if there's not a G-Day. And for me, Ben, as someone who grew up as a Georgia fan, like, that's music to my ears. I mean, we didn't go to a ton of Georgia games when I was younger, but we always went to the spring game. And it was kind of a tradition with me and my dad. We would go there, go to the spring game. We would go up the road to Gainesville Speedway, just a little local short track, and watch racing that night after we would go to Athens. So for me, I'm always one for the spring game, more so for like families. A lot of people aren't going to drop the money to bring little kids to games, but I think G-Day is like $5 to get into. I'm always for giving the fans an opportunity to get out, very low key game, not a lot of stress for anyone involved. I'm glad that it's going to be played this year, and I'm hoping that we continue to see that in years to come.
I like that one. And Josh, Kirby, I know y'all both listen to the Stay Wolk UGA recruiting show every single episode. I know it. So if you're listening,
we've seen the numbers. Don't lie.
We've seen the numbers. It's got to be y'all that are doing this, but please just put the Masters on the big screen. I know that you're going to have some replay clips and things like that, but like, please we want as many people in Sanford Stadium as you do for these G-Day. Like, I like the environment. I'm with Jordan. I love G-Day. It's just something that has a special place in my heart. But just let us have the Masters too. I understand the calendar has made it so you've got to finish spring by April 14th so that you can get out on the road and start recruiting. But just let us watch the Masters while we're in Sanford Stadium, please.
If you want to see grown men openly weep, give us Gunnar Stockton throwing a touchdown at G-Day while we see a perfect putt on the big screen at the Masters.
And I'm not trying to, again, Josh, I'm not trying to say like, hey, there needs to be a new big screen, but like if you had a bigger screen in Stegeman, and I've covered some teams that have some ridiculously massive screens in their football stadium. You have a little bit of bigger screen. I mean, you could do a perfect split screen, full replays on one side, full Masters on the other side. I don't think you have enough time to be able to get that job done, but just spitballing for next year.
Well, not with that attitude, Ben. My other arrow pointing up, I had a chance to go back to Auburn, which is a place both of us have spent a good bit of time. I went back this weekend because Georgia basketball was playing Auburn. Was impressed with that game, even though Georgia lost. But arrow pointing up, Wildflower Bakery in Waverly. Ben, I had never been here. This is a place that came highly recommended from friends like Justin Ferguson and Nathan King. It was fantastic. We had a few different croissants. I know that there was a biscuit that they raved about. If you go back to Auburn, Ben, go out to Waverly. It's like 10, 15 minutes outside of Auburn. Wildflower Bakery. It was fantastic.
I think one of my hottest takes that I ever gave on Justin Ferguson's Auburn Observer podcast, he asked me, like, what's your hottest Auburn over Georgia take or Auburn over Athens take? And I think it was that I like the Auburn food scene as much or more than the Athens food scene, which would be, some people would just find that to be an egregious take. Now that I've been back in Athens for, 5 years, 6 years now, my take might have sort of gravitated to the mean a little bit. And I feel strongly about both of the food takes on both sides of things.
You can't go wrong, I think, either place. I'll shout out another place that we went the week before, Botanic. If you're there for brunch, it is so good. I don't think it was around while we were still living there, but yeah, Botanic in Auburn is fantastic too.